Welcome to the Friday Focus podcast for the 12th of September. I'm Rudyard Griffiths, chair of the Monk Debates, joined in studio by Janice Gross-Stein. Janice, great to be in conversation with you today.
And great to be here in the studio with you, Rudyard.
Absolutely. And we are making, again, all these podcasts, if you're listening, available as full-length videos for our paid donors. And if you're not a paid donor, you want to check out the first half of the show on YouTube, head over to our YouTube channel, over 85,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is just great, and tens of thousands of downloads each week. A consequential week, Janice, so much that we could talk about, but I think we've decided on two topics, and the first really has to be the killing of American conservative organizer, podcaster, media personality, Charlie Kirk. Maybe not so much the event itself, which has now been well covered over the last 72 hours, but the fallout. And what you've seen and heard since then as a political scientist looking at the United States, what does this reveal about the state of American culture and society and democracy in the aftermath of this tragic event?
It's very concerning, Rudyard. You know, in the immediate wake of his murder, there were, from what I would call mainstream organizations, both on the right and on the left, there were condemnations of violence and the damage and the danger of violence. But move out of that into the Twitter sphere, a firestorm, frankly. And where it starts, it doesn't really matter. There was a firestorm. There were tweets about vengeance and what those who would define themselves as sympathetic to him would do. And there were those on the left who said, you know, overdue, long time coming. And really what it is, it's a glorification of violence. If you're looking for data on this, there is a long-time student, Robert Pape, in the United States, academic, who said yesterday that he's been monitoring violent language in American politics since January the 6th. And this is the peak that he's seen of, frankly, threats of violence. There's a smell about this, Rudyard. It's, you know, your spidey sense, my spidey sense. We're at an increasingly dangerous time.
Yeah. Let's try to pair some things off from each other, because America has a gun violence problem. There were multiple school shootings this week. To what extent is there a potential risk for an analysis here to conflate Charlie Kirk's political activism and his kind of adjacency to the Trump presidency with an attack that seems to have a lot of the elements of a traditional, shooter event in the United States, a high-powered rifle, seemingly, we don't know quite yet, but it looks like possibly a male suspect, someone who, once again, like the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt on the president's life, involved clearly some planning and a desire to wreak vengeance on what would be seen as a political opponent or someone that the shooter feels is a threat probably to America and our collective way of life. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are we right to look at these things as political events, or should we be looking them as kind of sociological events? Because there is a difference. I think of assassinations like the Archduke Franz Ferdinand I think that was in Bosnia.
It was.
That clearly to me is a political assassination. It was a young radical who was opposed to the Austrian Empire's occupation of what is present-day Yugoslavia, and Princip, I believe was his name, and he along with a bunch of other students attempted to kill the,
right.
and succeeded in killing the Archduke. It ultimately was a big role in triggering World War I. But there's category differences here, aren't there?
There are category differences. So we can make a difference between people, and who knows, right? Who knows? Because, but the argument is anyway that in a climate of heated violence with heated rhetoric, people who are predisposed to mental health challenges
Get triggered.
That's exactly the argument. So to me, it's the first part of the argument that matters, that we have a climate of language that is becoming more and more violent. And that's when you begin to see this. Look back over the last year, Rudyard. There are other political figures who've been targeted, Pritzker, others, Shapiro, and the governors who have been targeted. Who knows what the motivation is? So it could be sociological, but that sociological trend itself only occurs when you have just an environment full, and that's what the last 2 days were. I'm not a Twitter user. I left Twitter in protest. I don't use it, but I did look when this happened. It is reeking with violence on all sides.
Yeah, maybe one way to look at it is upstream and downstream.
Yes.
Upstream of these events, probably there is mental illness. There are, sociological factors, as you say, like a sense of us versus them, the polarization that we discussed. But then downstream, and I think that's why I would side with on this event that it is more of a political assassination, because regardless of whatever the killer, who he is and what his manifesto may or may not be, what we've seen in the last 48 hours downstream of the event
That's right.
is a highly politicized and charged event with, two sides, the MAGA movement and elements in that facing off against what you might call capital P progressives, and both sides, to a greater or lesser extent, but some, I would say to a greater extent, kind of losing it, losing a sense that I think this is what worries me is that people seem unconstrained by their own tribe or group in saying things that just should never be said. And I guess it's what I find concerning about this moment is that it's exposed the lack of kind of limiting norms on a lot of behavior within the tribes. I'm past the point of expecting the tribes to behave well with each other.
Don't give up on that, Roger.
Let's forget about that. I'm just simply saying that if you're in one tribe and you think you can say, Charlie Kirk, deserved this. He thank God he's dead. These kinds of statements would just seem to be canceling of somebody, regardless of what tribe you belong to or where your political orientations are. We don't say these things because they're disgusting.
No, that's right. And let's go a little step further and push the envelope just a little bit. So people who have any kind of public responsibilities, right? Whether it's editorial writers or journalists or teachers or anybody. So it's not only, as it often is on Twitter, about yourself, but you have responsibilities to others. There's an obligation, right, to model what is fundamentally just decent behavior. Strip away this whole story. Somebody took a gun and killed somebody else that was sitting in a tent, and regardless of what their political views were, that's just not okay in any world to do that. And if you don't start there, we're in deep trouble, Roger. We're in deep trouble.
As we get to the end of this first segment of the show, just to, again, draw on your kind of experience as a political scientist, I felt there are elements of this killing that worry me, and also in the context of we look at failing states. I would say just go south of the border to Mexico, where we've seen a horrible rash of killings and violence now for decades, but intensifying as the cartels have continued to strangle the country, and politicians and activists have come under threat and death. It's different in the United States. We don't have drug cartels. We don't have militias like in the Sudan. But there's something about about a shift, a change. This doesn't seem like the behavior of a kind of first world democracy. It seems as if it is the behavior of a society that is racked, one, by violence, two, by divisions, and three, by some kind of, tolerance or permission for people to either act or, I would say even worse, fantasize about these things. And kind of, I was biking home yesterday from our studios here in downtown Toronto through the University of Toronto campus. This has nothing to do with U of T, but I saw a poster by the Canadian Communist Party, which had a picture of the young man who brutally murdered the healthcare executive in the United States, cowardly shooting him from behind. And here's this poster with this, picture of the chiseled-faced, young assassin, saying, in effect, we're all communists now. This is in Canada. This is at, St. George and Harvard Street. Yeah. And I guess that, and then 10x that to the United States, and you just start thinking, where the hell's the Enlightenment? Like, where's the last 200 years of reason and agency and individual
discipline, self-discipline,
yes,
and a sense of a larger responsibility, right? So that is an implicit. That's a dog whistle to violence.
It
that
is.
Poster, and you and I were.
Is it a hate crime? I don't know. I mean, to me, it's verging on something.
Yeah. Well, the courts will, even and again, the courts play a different role in Canada, and I always remind people of this. We have hate laws. The United States does not, and so the debate is completely different. But let's talk for a minute about the president. I mean, this is a close friend of the president. The president has argued that he was one of the most influential people in getting him elected. So you would expect to see a grieving president. I wouldn't say that Donald Trump's behavior is the kind of above the fray minister. That's what you're looking for, minister to the country at a time when a reprehensible act was committed. That's not the role the president is playing, frankly. Yeah. That's part of the large. You're right to point, to put your finger on the pulse. This is a democracy in trouble.
Yeah, and we just hope again that there are not reprisals. And
if you inflame enough, Rudyard, people who have a predisposition, as you just said, get triggered, and that's why there's a responsibility on everybody not to inflame.
Yeah, I guess what's worrying though is going beyond simply the mentally ill who are triggered to a new step in stage, a waterfall or a cascade, where people like Princip in Bosnia or whatever in 1914 are acting solely out of political motives and are, in a sense, just openly bringing violence and the threat and the reality of assassination and death to the public square. I sense we're not there yet, but the Kirk assassination is to me is the closest we've seen America get to that.
Yeah, and you're right also to talk about waves. We know this comes in waves, right? One happens, it encourages others, and they're cyclical. That's why they're so dangerous unless there is across-the-board condemnation of murder. Let's call this what it is. It's murder. It is a criminal act.
Yeah.